So this video is just going to be a little bit about inspirations for each piece. I'm going to run through sort of one piece per video, and we're going to start with one that I called the Synthwave Jam. So this comes in movement 2 of the symphony, and basically the idea behind it was to create a sort of atmospheric, very ambient piece that was quite abstract. So I decided to use a few different types of synth. I tried to use the guitar sparingly. I tried to sort of have the guitar as a background instrument to just lift what the synth was doing. The synth was always the most important sort of aspect of it. So what you'll be able to see if I just go into the automation is we put a little bit of a fade in on the drums and the bass, and the effect of that was just to sort of bring the piece in slowly. The synth is playing at full volume throughout, but I wanted this sort of feeling of a swell to come and accompany the synth sound. So I'll just play this first little intro so that you can hear that. Sorry about that, a little system overload there because there's a lot of files in there. So what you can hear there, we've got this bass synth, which I put it on as an arpeggiator at sort of half speed and gated it really heavily so you get quite a defined staccato sound. So if we just solo that and play that. And then we've done the same on the retro fuzz, but with this one, see, that one's even more heavily gated, but it's a bit of a higher pitched sound. And you blend those two together, you've got a wide sound. We've also got, it was supposed to be a bass part, but it's actually sort of a very ambient, simple guitar part. So I'll just solo that as well. And it's obviously covered in echo. It's got some pedals on there. So we've got an echo pedal, we've got a little bit of a drive on there, we've got a flange effect and a compressor. So when you combine those three sounds together, it sounds like this. They're all playing the same thing. And you just hear that guitar slowly start coming in. And we've actually also got another part that combines with those two synth parts, which is it's just a drone, sort of a droney synth sound. So we'll play those three synth parts together. So you hear that. It's just a drone sound, very simple. Just adds a different texture. And then we've also obviously got the drums as well. There's two different types of drums. So there's your basic standard acoustic kit sound. Sorry, one second. So what I did was, I believe I mixed these out. No, I didn't. Ah, yes we did. So, sorry about this. This is what you've got. It's nice sort of backbeat sound, some ghost notes in there, very simple. Very laid back, and that was important for this piece. And we also, I did this very recently, I added an electronic kit in to play something very similar, So that part is playing this. It's pretty much identical. We go into the Logic drummer, got some cowbell on there, some claps, shakers, hi-hat. It's a pretty standard setup, but you blend those two sounds together and it just gives that nice little lift of a real acoustic kit on top of the electronic kit. And then we get into this part on bar 9, so just for a quick bit of sort of background on the piece, it's around 90 BPM, it's very slow, very relaxed, laid back, straight 4/4 all the way through, and it is in the key of, I believe it's E flat minor. So what you get here is you get these, what I call the rhythm swells, and they're just playing extended chords, so I'll just let you listen to that quickly. So I tried to make use of seventh chords quite a lot in this. So that builds in obviously with these synth sounds and the drums and the other guitar. And then, as you can see, we've got this massive solos part, and this is your lead synth, this is the key melody. It changes very little throughout the piece once it comes in, and there's a little sort of turnaround that happens every time at the end of each guitar chord progression. It's a really simple turnaround, really catchy, and that was something that I wanted in this piece. I wanted one key melody that just repeated over and over. And grew with the piece, so it doesn't. This individual section doesn't change at all, but the piece grows around it, and then the impact of that piece changes. Of that little melody, it becomes more profound as it goes through. So we'll just give you a little snippet of that melody there. And here comes the turnaround. So that ba-da-da-da-da is the key melody that I was talking about, and it happens every time. You can see it happens a number of times, happens here, and again a couple of other times throughout the piece. It was important, I think, to find something like that, and it's something that playing around with synthesizers helps with, I think, rather than playing everything on guitar, which is obviously what I know the best. Because with guitar I seem to fall into patterns, whereas with the synth I play much more to what the piece needs. So what you can hear, if I just take it back a little bit, you can hear the impact of that synth, that lead synth coming in, and what that does. I'm really sorry about that. Just take it back a little bit. So you can hear the change, how that is affecting the piece. It's allowing the piece to grow, and there's room to breathe because it's quite a sparse part. The next thing I want to talk about is this delay guitar, which was put in there for quite a specific reason. I wanted to make the most of delay and reverb and the natural sort of trails that come from using those effects. And I didn't want it to be an overly complicated piece in terms of what each individual element was playing. Probably the most complicated aspect of it is the two rhythm guitar parts in terms of the chords that are being used. Some of them are quite stretchy, you know, and in terms of the harmony, there's some advanced harmony in there for sure. This this delay guitar part underneath the rhythm parts is really simple. It's a repeating melody. I'll just solo it for you. And what I did when I recorded it is I started playing it really, really lightly. And as the piece develops, I started to pick up the volume and the attack. But it's all still played fairly softly. I'm not sort of really digging into the guitar on there. I just wanted to give that extra layer underneath, and it's not something that you'll really particularly need to hear, but you feel it, and that's something that was quite important with this piece. Was everything had to be done in moderation. It had to be done carefully to make sure that the atmosphere was right. I looked a lot into sort of synthwave bands, so artists like Gunship, who members of their band have history in the metal and sort of alt rock communities, and then they came together and formed this synthwave band. And the way that they use their synthesizers and the way that they layer the tracks, it's very similar to this in some aspects. That gated, arpeggiated bass synth is something that they do a lot. And the lead sounds are very similar, very reminiscent of that. And when they do use the guitars, they tend to use them like this. So I'm just going to play that little bit for you here. It starts around here. So you can hear those natural trails and the way that it gives it a different effect. And another artist that influenced this specific guitar line was an artist called Rob Scallon. He put out a piece called Rain, and I'll leave a link to that in the blog post as well. I'll leave links to all the artists and stuff I've discussed in the blog post, and specific examples of what they do. But Rob Scallon released a piece called Rain, and it's really simple. It's one guitar track, that's all it is. It's just one guitar, but he plays it with a dotted eighth note delay. And what that does, he plays each note very staccato a lot of the time through the piece. He builds it up eventually, but initially it's very staccato. And he allows the delay to create the melody. So you get the little crossovers of notes, and depending on sort of what he's doing in terms of building the chords, depends on how the melody functions. So there's one part where there's a sort of back and forth, like a ping pong sort of style delay over a G chord, because of the choice that he's made in terms of where he's placing his fingers. But it's all, in terms of the rhythm that he is playing, it's all exactly the same throughout. It does not change. What does change is the way that he plays them, and that creates these different little melodies. And that's what you can hear in this little section here. So I'm not playing dum bum bum ba dum bum bum ba dum. I'm playing dum bum 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 bum. But you get that little crossover because of the delay, and that's a really interesting effect to me. So what I like about this is as the piece goes on. So if we go to around bar 41 here, and I'll just mute this because I'll talk about that track in a moment. What you get is just this little droney sound in the back that's got a little bit more clarity than the bass synth. And it links up nicely with that, what was the sort of bass guitar sound. So I'll just play that here. And as you can tell, I have loosened up on my playing there. It's much less staccato now, a bit more open. And then I've got two more pieces that I do need to discuss very quickly. There's this track, which just supplies another counter melody. So if we put all the guitars in together, the inspiration for this other guitar part, this like high lead, it's a sort of trick that Paramore use quite often, and it's not particularly something that I thought I'd use in this project because they use these high end chord voicings, up at the top end of the neck, which is fine. That can happen. I could do that with the heavier side of the progressive music, and that all works fine. But what this track really does nicely is it's got that little bit of swing in it every now and again, and that's something that it's not so common in the sort of heavier style of music. When artists, if they're swinging, everything's swinging. Whereas with this, everything else is quite straight. Obviously, the lead synth is syncopated. The bass synth has that gated arpeggio sound. The bass guitar's really straight. The rhythms are quite straight, and the pick and delay part is very consistent. And then you just get this little bit of swing. And this is why it was nice to write this piece, because it allowed me to sort of step away from my usual process of writing for this project, which has been grab a guitar, an experiment with the guitar. I started this piece with the synths, and the rhythm guitar, so the big ambient chords. That's how I started the piece, and then everything else was built on top of it, and it was just a chance to play around and experiment with elements of different styles. So you've got a bit of synthwave in here. That's obviously the main sort of genre that's present. Then you've got these big ambient progressive rock chords in the rhythm parts. You've got some sort of, I guess it's sort of a rock style with this delay track. And then here we sort of lean on sort of pop a little bit. And the last track that I want to talk to you about is this one, this deluxe modern piano sound. So in one of my other pieces, there's an electric piano part, and there's a very important melody that plays throughout. And it's a turnaround, and it sort of offsets the feel of the rest of the piece, but it really adds a nice texture. And I wanted to try and turn it into a bit of a motif, so something that appeared several times throughout the piece, the full composition. And I thought this was a perfect opportunity to do it. Again, play with syncopation, play with offsetting different instruments to each other, which is, as I've stated many a time over the course of this project, it's something that progressive artists do a lot. And I'll just play it for you. And then here it joins in with this. Moves to a different octave there, and then it appears again right at the end of the piece, and I'll just play that little bit with everything for you. Sorry about that. So that turnaround that happens at the end with the 2-note chords, it's something that this electric piano piece in the other composition did, and I loved it. I absolutely loved the idea behind it, and it's very reminiscent of something that Coheed and Cambria used to do a lot on their third record. They used electric piano to great effect, and they actually used a run very similar to this. Again, I'll find that and I will link it in the blog, but if you just listen to it on its own, it's lovely. It's so soft and delicate, and I just thought it was a really interesting way to play off everything else. So you've got you've got all these guitar parts, you've got, you know, the bass synth, and, you know, we'll solo everything apart from the drums here. And it sort of subtly links up with that lead synth, and they all just play off each other really nicely, and I was really, really happy with that part. But yeah, basically this piece was inspired by several different things. It was inspired by synthwave music, it was inspired by obviously progressive rock music, bands like Pink Floyd, Coheed and Cambria, and also some elements of pop in there as well. And I'm really happy with it. I think it achieves the idea of what I was trying to go for musically across the project, you know, bringing different genres together into this big mixing bowl and making them all work in tandem and work together perfectly. And I'm really, really happy with this piece. So, like I've said, this is the first entry in a series of pieces that will discuss each individual composition as a smaller part of the larger whole, and what songs and artists influenced them, musical techniques that I've used, and just how I basically put these pieces together. Alright, thank you.